So we find this book everywhere. Culpeper's Complete Herbal. I have found it in little free libraries. I have found it in every single used bookstore. I have found it at every single bookstore I've been to. It is available online for $1, and it's a really common book that we find. And what's fascinating is when we go into the history of Culpeper's Complete Herbal, here we have a book that was originally written. Now, they don't have the original date in here. This is the 1995 reprint. But Culpeper lived between 1616 and 1654. So this book is old. And what's fascinating about Culpeper is his staying power. And there's not a lot of herbals that continually are reprinted and reprinted. And so it's notable for that. It's probably the longest standing reprinted herbal out there. And what we find is a book that is full of the European herbs. And many of them we can find in our lawns. So it might be helpful to have a copy, because you might find within your lawn many of the herbs that Culpeper describes. Another interesting thing about Culpeper, and why I just love this book in many ways, is that Culpeper was fighting against, in England, he was a revolutionary, actually, against the king, but he was also fighting against the modern medical establishment that was happening in his time. And he was against the William Harvey's rule on medicine in London. And he took all of the Latin texts, he had learned Latin, he took all the Latin texts and translated it and made the medicine the people's medicine. And so he taught them all about the plants, plus what the doctors were learning, and just printed it all for everyone to be able to take care of themselves. And what he did, instead of making complicated formulas or expensive ingredients, he was telling the Londoners what they could find in their lawns along the roads as they were walking. And so he was really trying to make the people's medicine, which is a fight that people are still trying to do. It is a fight that people want to have empowerment to take care of themselves and have simple remedies that they can make at home. So maybe this is the lasting power of Culpeper's book. This plant is probably a common weed that you see in your lawns, or it overtakes your garden. And lo and behold, Culpeper has a use for it, because it is a very well-known European herb and grew in London. And it often grows with chickweed, which is here, and plantain, and other things in the shade. And a lot of people use chemicals to take this out of their lawn. But when we find that it has a medicine and it's useful for medicine, we might think better of it and think it's a great ground cover for shady places. So this is called ground ivy. The Latin is Glaucoma heteracea. The other names for it, what Culpeper called it, is alehoof. It's also called gill over the ground and creeping Charlie. And I don't know who Charlie is, but he's probably a creeper. And one of the things that we find when reading Culpeper is that he used astrology and astrological medicine. And that's what makes it really hard for us to engage with the text, or we think that, these people are doing weird occult quackery when we're reading the book, because we don't understand how to decode what Culpeper is trying to say. So let's read what Culpeper says on ground ivy. Government and virtues. It is an herb of Venus, and therefore cures the diseases she causes by sympathy, and those of Mars by antipathy. You may usually find it all the year long, except the year be extremely frosty. It is quick, sharp, and bitter in taste, and is thereby found to be hot and dry. A singular herb for all inward wounds, ulcerated lungs, or other parts, either by itself or boiled with other like herbs. And being drank in a short time, eases all griping pains, windy and choleric humors in the stomach, spleen, or belly. Helps the yellow jaundice by opening the stopping of the gall and liver, and melancholy by opening the stopping of the spleen. Expels venom or poison and also the plague. It provokes urine and women's courses. The decoction of it in wine drink for some time. Anyway, so I'm not going to keep going. There's more in there. But I wanted to talk about how do we, take that in, that it's an herb of Venus, and therefore cures the diseases she causes by sympathy and those of Mars by antipathy. So what does that mean? What is this medical astrology? So Venus is relaxing, warm, and moist, and deals with nutrient assimilation, tissue tone, and lymphatic function. It also has to do with the reproductive organs and the ability to reproduce. So what he's saying is that it can cure diseases of nutrient deficiency and deficiencies in the warm and moist humors. So it warms up the body if there's a deficiency, so by sympathy. And Mars is the aggressive, warm and dry, and it lives in the stomach and is about an aggressive digestive system and anger and overly hot. And so it actually can cool off that by antipathy. So it works against Mars and increases Venus. So he's talking about humors, he's talking about warm, cold, hot, and dry. And if we kind of decode what he's trying to say, we can understand that he's actually talking about patterns and temperatures and qualities, just like the 4 qualities. And this is how the medical astrology worked. But that's not all that we used ground ivy for. So we also might think that ground ivy looks like an ear. So we can think of it that way, because it is really great for ear infections. And I use this and was taught to use it. I use this for chronic ear infections in children, and I can't think of any more reliable herb for children that have chronic ear infections. And it's interesting that the qualities that Culpeper says is warm and moist, and ear infections have warm and moist quality to them, but this really cleans out ear infections in young children and gets rid of the chronic ear infections. And I always say, before someone tries tubes in the ears, they really should try ground ivy first, and I've seen it work many times. So that is one of my reliable uses for ground ivy. Many people use it to pull heavy metals out of the bloodstream as well, and people have been successful doing that. There's a lot of herbalists that talk about using it that way. And it's also a kidney remedy. So just thinking about, like, well, it could be like 2 kidneys too, couldn't it? It could be like the 2 kidneys on the side of the body. So ground ivy, you will notice it in your lawn when you mow your lawn because of the metallic smell, especially in mid-May when it's blooming. It has a beautiful blue flower to it, and in mid-May your lawn might be totally blue if it's a shady lawn, and you mow it down, and this like metallic, I mean, all I can really say, it has a metallic smell to it. And maybe that is what is appealing to people about thinking that ground ivy is used for heavy metal detoxification. But just a few thoughts on ground ivy, things that Culpeper doesn't mention. So let's see what Culpeper says about motherwort. Again, we have Venus owns this herb, so assimilation, nutrition, and it is under Leo. So we will find out what that means. There is no better herb to take melancholy vapors from the heart, to strengthen it and make a merry, cheerful, blithe soul than this herb. may be kept in a syrup or conserve. Therefore the Latins called it cardiaca. Besides, it makes women joyful mothers of children, and settles their wombs as they be. Therefore we call it motherwort. It is held to be of much use for the trembling heart and faintings and swoonings, from whence it took the name cardiaca. The powder thereof, to the quantity of a spoonful drinking wine, is a wonderful herb to help women in their sore travail, as also for the suffocating or risings of the mother. And for these effects it is likely it took its name of motherwort with us. It also provokes urine in women's courses, cleanses the chest of cold phlegm, oppressing it, kills worms in the belly. It is of good use to warm and dry up the cold humors. Warm and dry, warm and dry. To digest and disperse them that are settled in the veins, joints, and sinews of the body, and to help cramps and convulsions. So that is what Culpeper says about motherwort, Leonardus cardiaca. And because it is under Leo, this is where the Leonaris comes from, the lion heart herb. And this is what it looks like in the fall. These are the seeds. They are so pokey. They hurt. It has a square stem on it, which means it's in the Lamiaceae family. It is not extremely aromatic, but it is very, very, very bitter. And so he talks about it as a female herb because it helps with labor, and it also helps expel afterbirth, but it is known as an emmenagogue. We would call this an emmenagogue. So it increases urine too. So if you take this, if you drink tea, if you can handle it, it is the most bitter tea. If you drink the tea, it just flushes the kidneys, but it also can cause heavier menstruation. So it's not necessarily something that you want to take if a female wants to take if they have heavy menstruation already while they're during their menstrual cycle. The other thing about this herb is he talks about it for the heart. And for the heart, he has for the trembling of the heart, and it is extremely good at calming down tachycardia or just overexcitement of the heart. So that is where it's typically used in herbal medicine. As a bitter, it helps with digestion, and it was long used for osteoporosis with some other herbs like bone set that are very bitter. And as a digestive, it might actually help bring up the assimilation of nutrients. And so then we see that venous portion that he's talking about with the assimilation of nutrition. And if you can bring up and absorb more calcium in your diet because your digestive system is able to do that, you are going to build your bones. And so Venus is about that nutrient assimilation and building up the system. So what they're saying is building the blood, building the system. So that is what he's talking about with Venus. So Leo is about the heart, the back, and strength, and the spinal cord. So what we're talking about there is kind of the whole chest and upper body. And motherwort does strengthen just the back and bones, and used for osteoporosis, plus it calms the heart. So it has that Leo and the Venus in it, and that is what Culpeper is trying to explain. And it's, we can think of this medical astrology as if it's dogma, but there was a rational pattern thinking associated with it. So this is wild lettuce. It is fall. It's looking a little sad. It fell over. And it has similar leaves to dandelion, which is here. But if we look, dandelions look curly. to it, but some people can get this confused when it's on the ground. Both of them have white saps. Actually, this one right now, because it's dying, has the like gooey brownish sap. Crazy. Not white like the dandelion. So fun. Yeah, neat. Okay. And wild lettuce, lactuca species, I bet you this is rosa, this is not prickly lettuce, is the wild cousin of the lettuces that we eat in salads. Now, Culpeper doesn't have a description of the wild lettuce necessarily, but he does have a description of lettuce in general. And he says, it is so well known, being generally used as a salad herb, that it is altogether needless to write any description of it, which is true. And he says, government and virtues. The moon owns them, and that is the reason they cool and moisten what heat and dryness Mars causeth, because Mars has his fall in Cancer. And they cool the heat because the sun rules it, between whom and the moon is a reception in the generation of men, as you may see in my guide for women. The juice of lettuce mixed or boiled with oil of roses applied to the forehead and temples procures sleep and eases the headache, proceeding of a hot cause. It helps indigestion, quenches thirst, increases milk and nurses, eases griping pains in the stomach or bowels that come of choler, applied outwardly to the region of the heart, liver, or reins, or by bathing the said places with the juice of distilled water, wherein some white centers or red roses are put, not only represses the heat and inflations therein, but comforts and strengthens those parts. Galen advises old men to use it with spice, and where spices are wanting to add mints. The seed and distilled water of lettuce work the same effects in all things, but the use of lettuce is chiefly forbidden to those that are short-winded or have any imperfection in the lungs or spit blood. So that is what he says about lettuce. What is interesting is we often think of lettuce, he says warms. Now, lettuce is actually cooling. This is why we eat it often in the summer. But it's actually used for cold conditions. So it's fascinating. It's for when things are stuck in the body. So that is a fascinating piece to it.